Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and I have a extremely special guest today. I've been watching this story unfold for many years, and this is a documentary. My guest today is the producer of Ariel Phenomenon, the new movie that talks about the school experience in 1994 September at Ariel School. My guest is Randall Nickerson. I've heard lots of stories. It's the first time we sort of met. I've heard about his experiences trying to put this thing together, which I'll ask him about today. But I've known about this documentary for many years. It has been released, and we're going to talk about it today. And this is for the White House UFO YouTube channel. And it will also be, the audio will be posted on my Paranormal UFO Consciousness podcast. So welcome, Randall Nickerson. How are you doing?
I'm good, Grant. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Beautiful. Let's go a little bit through this story for the maybe 10 people who don't know. Can you basically sort of spell out the story in a couple of minutes of what happened and why you did a documentary on this?
Well, it was in 1994, September 16th. Basically, the basic story, which has been first came out in 95, after, when John Mack had visited the school. Was that a silver object was seen in the sky first by multiple people in the area and these children. And then this object, craft, whatever you want to call it, settled behind the playground, a good distance from the edge of the playing field. And the kids gathered. Many of them gathered at a certain spot to watch it. And then they saw these creatures start coming out of it. And at least two of them approached the playground. And one that there was, from their testimony, there was more than one, but there was one particular one that approached them. It was a very bizarre experience. From their perspective, and you can see in the film how just unusual the entire event was. It was all new, to these people.
Yeah. And how many did you eventually interview? How many of the kids did you actually talk to?
I talked to 43. There's more. There's a lot more, and I still get emails, every couple months from somebody that was there. Yeah, there was a couple people I wanted to get in the film, but we were already wrapping it up. But yes, there's quite a few witnesses. A lot of them did not want to be interviewed on camera, which I understand. It's everybody's personal choice. But they told the same story.
Wow.
And some details that I'd not heard before, because everybody was in a different location. It was a huge playground. And there were a group gathered at one particular point, but they all had different perspectives of what they were watching.
Wow. And how many made it into the film? How many did you have in the film?
I'm not sure. I think 8, 9. Okay. I mean, the problem with our rough cut was 4 hours. It was really hard to take people out, just to shorten it. That was tough.
Wow. Tell me about the making of the film. You spent what, 20 years making this film?
It'll be 15 years in September.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a journey in itself for sure. Making the film, I thought I could make it myself alone. Yeah. I tried that for 5 years. And I did a lot, I did every single job that is part of making a film. And then I reached a point where I ran into a friend from high school who happened to be a very, very well-known award-winning editor, Christopher Seward. And he came on board once he saw the archival of the children, because he, like everybody does, they said that they're telling the truth. Whatever they're talking about, they're telling the truth. So that's when he came on board, and I started to get more crew. Thank God. It would, if I tried to complete it alone, it would have been another 10 years.
Yeah.
So I needed the help, and the help really was fantastic. The people that have helped me, hundreds and hundreds of people have supported me and helped me make this happen. And hats off to them.
And you had to raise a lot of money to do this, right?
Yes. That was something I didn't expect. The further I went along, I realized, oh, well, I have to pay for the rights for this, and then I have to get an attorney, and then all these things, and then crew costs. To get good people, it's expensive. So yeah, my budget idea went from $100,000 to $1 million, like that, and then it became a major issue because it was sort of stop and go, where I had to stop and just focus on raising money. So yeah, that was a struggle in itself. That's a whole story. But yeah, it was a worthy story to tell. I wouldn't have bothered if I wouldn't have put 14 and a half years of my life into it if I didn't think there was something there.
And we had mentioned you had some trouble right at the very end. Are you able to talk about that with the film?
With launching it?
Yeah, well, the night before you told me a little story. Are you able to tell that?
Yeah, we just found out we had 2 forensics teams for IT look into what happened on our launch, which was May 20th. And we found that we were hacked on the 19th of May. So we're tracing that back. But we're going to be very, we're going to publish what we needed to say about it. When everything, and just have the professionals speak about it rather than me. But that I can tell you, somebody for whatever reason hacked our site, hacked our servers.
Did that surprise you? I mean, had you had any experience before with interference with the film, or was that something new?
Electronically, that was new.
Okay.
Electronically, yeah.
So this would indicate that there's some people behind the scenes who still don't want the story told. That makes sense to me. I know I've heard this from other producers.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a delicate matter, the whole idea of another civilization or species being out there. I think it's for the people that run the show, so to speak. I can understand it would be concerning to not want the public to panic, or they want to. If it was me, I'd want to have, and I was in power, I would want to kind of try to control how this comes out.
Well, congratulations for actually getting it out. I mean, I applaud you, because I kept hearing, and I thought, wow, is he ever going to get this thing out? Because I kept hearing that he's working on it, and the fundraising was going on. So you get my approval for actually getting it out. What was the reaction? We talked about this a little bit before. What kind of reaction did you get from people that encouraged you that this had been worthwhile?
When I was making the film?
After the film, like with the reactions you got after the film that encouraged you that this had been worth it. Who did you hear from? I
heard from just countless people, friends. Yeah, it was very humbling, to be honest with you. Like, it just felt like, yeah, thank God, like it was worth all that effort. And to tell the story in a gentle way, rather than trying to convince anybody or anything like that. So yeah, the response has been incredible. And we're looking forward to having it on some major streamers pretty soon.
Wow.
That's the next step.
And the children, how did they react after the film when they saw the final cut? Were they?
Well, a lot of them don't want to watch it because of what it brings up. The ones that have seen it have been just thankful. I'm still waiting to hear from a few people. I got an amazing text from, message from one of the teachers. and that was there at the time. And she said, she just really thanked me for treating it in such a, I think her words were that, in a gentle way. And yeah, those are important to me. Those are the people I've worked with for a long time and have had friendships and relationships for a long time. So to get their salute means a lot to me.
Maybe to describe for me the documentary. What did you do in the documentary, and what do people see when they watch the documentary? What was your sort of take, and how did you put it together?
Well, and it just, initially I only had John Mack's footage of the children, and that's where I started. And I transferred all that from Beta SP. I spent weeks transferring that to digital in 2007. And then it became apparent to me that I can't really tell this story with just his material. I had no idea there was more material out there. I had no idea the BBC was there, none of that. So I tracked down the school with the help from a woman from South Africa, Nikki Carter, and as soon as I found out the school existed, because everybody said it was gone, I went there right away and got on a plane. I had no idea. When you just all of a sudden leave the United States and jump into Africa, wow, with no preparation, that was an experience. But yeah, and then I found more and more footage that other news agencies had filmed of these children at the time. And then I became really, really fascinated because I had comparisons. And yeah, I just kept going further, found the BBC reporter. He had kept everything. All the reporters did. They'd kept all these things because they knew it was important. So yeah, it was, and I had to be really objective, really, as a filmmaker, to really ask the questions and talk to people that had other opinions about it, what happened. What surprised me was that the opinions didn't fit, or there wasn't. First of all, there weren't many people that even had to tell me that it didn't happen. Even one of the teachers who raised his hand during the meeting and said, "I don't believe the kids. I think they made it up." I found that guy because I wanted to hear his side of the story. And by that time, he had changed his mind, and he told me that he believes them because of the consistency over time. And I also came to find out he didn't actually work with the kids, so he didn't know from all the teachers that worked with the kids or were in their class saw the effect that it had on the children. So I don't know. That was a little roundabout way of telling it. And then it got into editing, editing the story. How do I tell this story? I didn't want to use a narrator. And I also realized, because I had hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage, that they can tell the story with their own words. That's hard to do. It's so much easier to do with a narrator to steer the story. But I had enough footage that they could tell it themselves. And that's the best way, in my opinion, for a story to be told, is out of the mouth of, it's all first person, no third person, no second person, it's all first person.
And you cut a lot of footage. You cut a lot of stories that may have, was there anything in those stories that you can mention that was new in terms of stuff that didn't get in the film? Or even maybe just what was new from the John Mack footage from many years ago? What are the things that when you did the new interviews that you discovered that you had not known before?
Of John Mack? Or
well, they say the John Mack film, and then you go, oh, this wasn't in the John Mack film. This is new. This is new. Kids are telling you new stuff. What was there that surprised you that wasn't in the John Mack interviews?
Oh, from the new footage.
Yeah.
Just different details, different, perspectives, what they saw, how they described what they saw. That's in small details that are actually really important, but they, it wasn't important enough for anybody to really understand, for the story. But those details to me convinced me, not to, there's plenty of that in the film, but there's more. And it was hard. It was really hard to cut these things out. They call it in the film world, killing your babies, because you get so attached to these certain many pieces of footage and interviews, and it's just you got to make tough decisions.
Any plans to do anything with any of that footage in the future?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can do a director's cut. Ideally, that would be nice, so we can actually spell out. We had to get it down to a reasonable time. We were at the director's cut exists already. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes. It's a long movie, but it tells the story in a more in-depth way, prospectively. Time, where people were, the layout of the playground. It goes into great detail there. So yeah, hopefully that's going to be next. And we're already going to start working on that. Just so the whole story, as much as the story that can be told, that was the drive in the beginning, was to tell the whole story. And the film does represent that for sure, but there's more details I think people would be interested to know.
Now, there's been a number of school sightings. Preston Dennett actually wrote a book on all the school sightings. Why do you think the Ariel School became sort of the top story? Is it John Mack? Talk about John Mack's influence on this. Would it have been as big a story if John Mack hadn't been involved?
Probably not. I think there were a lot of key players that if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't know about it. And the first one was the BBC reporter, Tim. None of this would have happened if one of the parents didn't call him, because the teachers didn't believe him. They went, and all the kids went home and told their parents. The parents went back to the school and said, "What's going on?" And one of the parents called a friend who happened to work for the BBC, and he went out there. And he's also the one that contacted Cynthia Hind, and then he called John Mack on that very night. He was reaching out for anything, because this was way beyond his perspective. And he had seen some of the most gruesome, as a war reporter, gruesome things. So this was, for him to react like this was he was shocked. He was very skeptical in the beginning. Like, "Do you sure it wasn't a helicopter or airplane?" He went through everything to try to say, "No, you couldn't have, that's not what you saw." And the kids just said no, and he was just stunned by that. And then he has his own journey of coming around to opening his mind to the fact that this could have happened. And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, there's a lot of stories around the globe that I found out during this process. I actually went to Broadhaven in Wales. There was that Australian.
Yeah, Westall.
There's one in Chile, one in Peru, one in Russia. I mean, there's one in Florida.
Which gets into the idea of what's going on. Why schools? Why do you think, just speculating, why would they land at a school? And I may get into the messages that some of these kids got in terms of what was going on. Did you have anything? I mean, not that it's the final answer, but any speculation on what they were actually doing there, these beings? Because they didn't seem to do anything except to interact with the kids a little bit.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't know. I just through the process of making this film, this is a very widespread phenomenon, if that's what you want to call it. There's a lot of people that have run into these things or seen these craft that are just beyond our imagination. But I don't know exactly what they're here for, or what's, I don't know. I think about it all the time. I go over in my mind a lot to try to understand and put pieces together. And I've just basically come to the understanding personally, my opinion is that they're just like us. They're just more evolved, have been around for a long time, and they're interested in this planet as a biosphere. And yeah, I think like us, we want to try to keep everything as much as we can alive and study it.
Talk a little bit about some of the messages that the children received, and do they still react the same years after to, they talked about the messages coming out of the eyes, right? It was coming out of the aliens' eyes. And some of them I know, like Emily Trim got the technological images. The girl beside her got the ecology images. So what kind of, talk a little bit about the messages that these kids had, and did they still remember it many years later?
The message pretty simply was a reflection of what we were doing. The humanity was doing to its own environment. That's consistent. I found that consistent with other people also that had had encounters, because I did the deep dive on that as well. In the present day, some remember, some want to talk about it, and others don't remember what that experience was, because I think that was the pinnacle moment when there was contact between them directly, between the children and this particular being or creature, whatever you want to call it. And then there's people that are embarrassed to even say anything, but I think that's changing. And I really hope, my wish, is that these people come forward on their own. And I know there's a lot out there who are quiet. Amongst these children and other witnesses to this same event that were around the school, I really hope they come forward and speak, because I know they're there. It's up to them though, right? You can't force it.
Do you think that the recent efforts by people forcing the U.S. government to make these admissions, and now NASA getting their own program, has helped the cause of what you're trying to do?
Can you, yeah.
Well, just your reaction to this sort of now disclosure thing that's going on, where before it was, you talked about UFOs and people looked the other way, and now it's sort of been confirmed that, yeah, this is for real. I mean, do you think that's helped in the cause for guys like you who are trying to get out the same sort of message, where people are, don't want to talk, they, I don't want to go on camera? Do you think that's going to help in the future?
I do. I think what we're seeing now, we're somebody said it on some program that we're destigmatizing it.
Yeah.
Because the stigmatization has cost us a lot of information. We've lost a lot of information that we could have gathered for decades and decades. And I don't know what changed exactly, but it's finally being looked at in the appropriate manner. And they're starting to gather as much information as possible. And that's a good thing. We have to be aware. We can't just we have to let people who know and who've seen these things and can describe anything, to be honest, that's real. That data needs to be collected. Every piece of data is valuable to understand who they are, what they want, you know, and again, it's my big question is what's their end game here?
Now, you've had your own experiences, which you don't really talk about, but do you think you would have done this documentary without having had some experiences of your own?
No. No, it's something, it opened, I mean, that's the other reason I had to be extremely objective on this project, because I had seen something myself. But yeah, it's something I don't even, I mean, it's not my story, it's theirs. Yeah. But it's not an unusual, there's plenty of people out there, you know, and a lot of people trying to get this story out in all kinds of different ways. So we as a species together can look at it and we got to look at it straight on.
Talk about the kids. It influenced a lot of these kids, correct? It's not like people sort of got the idea you see a UFO and it's like okay, that's a UFO. But these kids a lot of them were traumatized not traumatized, but very affected by it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. There's some things that aren't in the film, like there were 3 kids that were really traumatized that a paramedic worked with, that he was also had a degree in psychology. There were several that didn't want to go back to school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Your sort of main character is Emily Trim, and she's a Canadian. And she was highly influenced by this. She had a second experience. Do you talk about that in the documentary where she has the experience in Hamilton, which really encourages her to start this painting? Can you talk a little bit about Emily Trim and her paintings and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, Emily's I just give her a lot of credit, you know, for being brave, and she's an incredible artist. What was really interesting was she had been painting the same painting of this craft for years and years and years. And she never knew what she had drawn at Ariel until that moment on film. And wow, that was just profound to even witness, you know, somebody's process, which is why I chose Emily. She was in the process of trying to understand it and put it together in her own life and to make sense with it. Yeah, she's a really brilliant artist. I've never seen somebody like that, like be able to, I've seen her paint in front of me many times, and I was like, wow, how do you do that? She's so passionate and so focused. Yeah, she's got a great career ahead of her. She's doing well.
And her paintings all have to do with the UFO type thing, because in some, she mentioned she had some symbols. She said the important thing is not it's the symbols. Did you get into that of your understanding of? Are they all? Let me first ask: Are all her paintings sort of like UFO related type things?
No, I think a lot.
Yeah.
Majority, but she does all kinds of other animals, and she has a great sketch of a lion. But no, she mixes it up.
And have you got one of her paintings?
I have 3.
Because I think she sells them, correct? But
she's going to, yeah.
She's done what? How many has she done?
Oh gosh, I don't know where she's at now. I mean, at the time, she probably has 700, 800. And she gets up in the morning and paints. I mean, I haven't seen that. You see that with famous artists. They just can't put it down. They wake up in the morning and that's what they do all day. I have no idea, but I know she's going to do fine with her art. Yep.
Has she resolved everything? Has she come to grips with what happened? Because she was pretty, and we can get into the religion thing. I mean, she was pretty in a bad spot back in that time. And has she resolved everything now?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's what you can, how does it get resolved? It's something you just have to learn to live with. What I did see progress with, is with her family and, her being able to speak about it. Like, it's the same topic we were talking about before. The stigma is raising away and going away, thank God. So, I mean, it's really hard when you have something happen and you have absolutely no one to talk to about it. That's her story. Yeah. And many people's story, which is why she was the perfect example of that, because that's everybody's story.
Were there other witnesses that did things like her? Like she went into this painting thing and were there other witnesses that had these bizarre sort of lives where it was linked to the thing where they suddenly started to do something like that?
There are a few.
Yeah.
Yes. Very interesting career choices that some of the children have made that I found fascinating.
Wow.
There's one of the witnesses. She witnessed this in 6th grade, and she's now a 6th grade teacher.
There you go.
There's a lot of those stories. Just, it's like, wow, fascinating. Yeah. I don't know if I'll ever be done with Ariel because there's so many pieces to this big story. I'll always keep my ear to the ground with this one.
The Emily Trim, I wanted to ask about this. I think we mentioned before, this rapid image cycling. There was 2 of them that Emily Trim, the girls beside her. Was there others that got this thing with these rapid images being sort of given to them?
Yes, and that's also common.
Yeah.
In other cases around the world. Yeah, it's flashing images so fast that it's hard to even see what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting because, as I mentioned to you, that the Bankston method, it claims to be able to cure cancer. That's how they do it, and they teach you to flip images 1 or 2, 3,000 a second. Just this training that they go through, and then you have. When I went to dig deep into the story, there was an alien connection to both Bankston and the guy who taught it to him, which was kind of interesting. Which I guess we could learn. Is there anything we can learn from this that interested me because I'd seen it in other cases? Is there something there that was interesting that people should really pay attention to in terms of what these kids were saying or what they saw?
I think there's a lot that was important. I think one of the things that is really interesting in their description is time. That time was variable or was affected. Their perceptions of time was affected. That's one thing. I mean, there's so many things we can learn about this entire thing that would help us as a collective. I think one of the biggest things that I learned actually from a lot of the African chiefs and African Sangomas was that it's just another form of nature, and that we can't forget we are part of nature. I think to me, that's the biggest lesson that I learned, that I took away from it was the takeaway was it's just another animal, just one that's far above us in the food chain. And there's something really humbling about that, but also exciting. What can we learn? What can we learn from them? They've been around, obviously, for a long time. And what can we learn from them? That's how I feel personally. And I'm sure a lot of people around the world that are building technology, are on the cutting edge of technology also want to know as much of that as possible, because it can just grow us by leaps and bounds as a species.
Let me ask a little bit about beliefs. When I did my first, I had my sighting, 2 very direct close encounter sightings in 3 nights in 1975. I started to, like you, I went to this town and I started to interview everybody in the town. I ran into one case of a 7-year-old boy who was within 50 feet of this thing hovering in a tree, and all sorts of physical effects and stuff like that. And his mother was very religious and had believed this was the devil. And I was brought in on a Wednesday night to interview this kid. Dramatic story. And I don't think the mother ever did know that the son had been interviewed. But yeah, I think you ran into that, this idea of beliefs, where people were into this idea, it's this or it's that.
Yes. I had one particular interview of one of the very close witnesses, and we talked on the phone and everything was fine. And we had set up an interview time, and I drove hours to get to him in Africa. And then I couldn't find the house right away. So I called him, and his wife got on the phone and said, whatever happened at Ariel was the devil, and he's not going to meet with you. And I was stunned by that. But I understand there are people that, one of the things that told me was whatever happened at Ariel was real. You know, if you're calling it the devil or anything else, something definitely happened there. And I know just from talking to him that it was a profound experience. But it was, yeah, I've run into that, the beliefs, you know, of it's something evil or good. I'm beyond that. It's not, I don't even believe in good, bad, you know, not when it comes to this, we don't have the tools to really understand what this is, and we shouldn't be judging it in any way, really, until we find out exactly what it is. But yeah, belief systems are a tough one. Worldviews are a tough one, because we get so attached to them that we become blind, and that's not a good thing to do in nature.
The other belief system I want to talk to you about is the academic belief at Harvard. Can you talk about your experience at Harvard?
Yeah, great school. I don't know what exactly.
Well, you were brought in at Harvard for John Mack for the Inquisition or whatever they had, and it was this belief system that this couldn't possibly be happening. This guy's lost it, and so they start this thing to pull his tenure, and you were dragged into that. I was kind of surprised that happened. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Me and many others, probably 40 others. I don't know. I was 25 years old. You know, brought to Harvard University to this boardroom, you know, that was all oak and huge, and just, it was really intimidating. But they were out to get that man. They were trying to get anybody to, I don't know, just destroy his reputation. That's what they were looking for. And they, to be honest with you, they succeeded at that. You know, whoever was behind this, I don't know exactly, but they succeeded at ruining his reputation at the university. You know, over time, that's gonna change, because he was a man ahead of his time who took a stand for the right reasons. But yeah, it was a very concerted effort. I was there. I saw what happened. And I got to say that, you know, there's many others who've, and yourself included, who've stood up and, you know, you put everything on the line for a long time. And yeah, I just salute that kind of commitment and dedication, because you don't get rewarded for that. You just do it because, you know, it's the right thing to do.
How did you meet John Mack?
How?
How?
It was in 1991 I met John Mack. He was speaking at a conference, some kind of conference. I don't even remember where. It was out toward Boston. That was the first time I met him. Yep.
And you saw his film clips from Ariel in what, 96?
95. Yeah. He was at a at a meeting, and he was showing the clips of these kids, and I'll never forget that, because they were just so genuine. And yeah, and that was my first awareness of Ariel. I never saw it it was aired on Sightings and several other programs at the time. And then after 95, it kind of disappeared till I dug it up. It's kind of interesting. That's such a story like that. But again, nobody was going to go to Africa. You know, I mean, Africa now is sort of a travel destination, but not, you know, it wasn't, not in 2007. And 2007, 2008, there was a lot of conflict going on in that particular country. Anyway, but yeah, you had to go over there and be on the ground and meet these people. I mean, granted, a lot of the children they're in every single country on the planet, like Germany, all over the place, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Yeah, they've because of the political situation in the country, they had to leave.
Are you happy you did the documentary?
Absolutely. I wish it didn't take so much.
It was a big project. I mean, I congratulate you, because I mean, that's a major. It's not a little documentary. It was a major undertaking that you did.
Yeah, I can finally get back to my life, I feel, in a way, because you get so involved, and it was a long time to put things on the shelf for this film. And now I feel like, oh my God, I can actually do some things I actually wanted to do in my life.
Any plans for any other documentaries? Were you going to do one on John Mack? Or
I don't know. I mean, I have more than enough to do that. That's for sure. Yeah. I just have so much footage of him, and footage that I found that, just very rare footage that nobody has. The one film I was working on and is already in the can is about Bud Hopkins and his life, his life, and I'd like to finish that. It's a really good story, and then I have another project that's in the works relating to this, but again, it's in Africa. Which I think, to me, Africa is just a very, not a clean slate, but probably one of the cleanest slates on the planet, as far as people not knowing the lingo or seeing the programs. And, there's enough people there that don't have any idea how to describe it in words that we use in the Western world. And to me, as an investigator, filmmaker, that's really important. When somebody describes it not as a flying saucer or any of the typical language we have, but uses their own native understanding and references that they can make that have nothing to do with popular culture or anything that's been said about this phenomenon.
And especially in '94, did they even have TVs or stuff there in
there were a few kids that had those big satellite dishes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's it. And even then, like it's not like no one had access to TV. A lot of, some kids would get sent cartoons from Canada or the United States on VHS tape. That's the only way they could watch TV.
Wow.
The Shona, the native Shona, they didn't have anything. You know, that fascinates me because they described the same thing, yet they had no access whatsoever. So you had, varying degrees of that, exposure to media. That was also really interesting. So it wasn't like nobody had any access. There were a few kids that came from very wealthy families.
As you know, a lot of experiencers have a tough time with, especially at the beginning when they have their experiences. Do you think that your film is going to help other experiencers who say are still in the closet, don't know what's going on, and this sort of thing?
I hope so. You know, it's you know, we've seen in the last decade, like, you know, people finally coming out of the closet about a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, and I think honestly, this is probably the last big one that we need to come out of the closet about and be accepted, so we can actually share what we've seen. You know, what these people have seen, what thousands of people have seen all across the globe. I think that day's here, and I'm really, really glad. And I hope this film helps people feel more accepted from what you know, because it's really, from everybody I've talked to, it's difficult, how something like this it's just unbelievable, you know, for a person. It's just outside of our ability to wrap our heads around it in a lot of ways. And to be alone with that is really tough. And I've known people who've not done so well with that. Yeah.
What about the witnesses after these many years? Do they see it as a positive experience? What's their reaction in terms of how they view it?
I don't think, again, it's, I would say it's, I don't really go to positive, negative, but I definitely would not say it was a negative overall. It was trauma. I mean, anytime you get exposed to something, there's trauma and there's fear and primal reactions. But over time, there's a lot that we're glad it happened. And it opened their minds. You know, a lot of the parents told me that. I asked them, like, how did your children change after the event? And they said, well, they began to think that anything was possible after seeing that. And that changed their lives and their ideas of what they could be in their lives, what careers they could, you know, it really brought possibility into those children's minds. That's from their parents.
Wow. Fascinating story.
Yeah.
I mean, I just encourage everybody. Where can people get a hold of the film? Where is it available right now?
Right now it's on arielphenomenon.com, and probably in the next 2 months we're going to be on a major streaming service. So, you know, in a few months. But yes, you can see it now at arielphenomenon.com. Watch the trailer, and if you want to rent it, that's where we're doing it at the moment. Yeah, we've been launched for a little over 2 weeks, I think 3 weeks now, but it's doing really well. And the reviews have been just, it touches my heart. Like, when you put a lot of work into something and get it out there and do it for other people, really, not for myself, partly, but you do it for other people, it's great to feel that that response.
Have you had any, like, I know my own experience is when you get the emails, you get stories that sort of like, wow, look into this. People telling you their experiences, opening
Yes.
up, and
That started from the beginning when I started doing the film.
Yeah.
And people heard us filmmakers doing this film, and people would write me, they'd come up to me, tell their story to me. And then they'd say, don't tell anybody I told you that.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible people, like people with really a lot of responsibility in their jobs. I'm sure you must have run into that. It's just, and so, I know there's a lot of people out there who have not told a soul. And I really hope those people come forward and in a safe space. Yeah.
And that's what you did in the movie, is try to create like a safe space for these people to tell their story and get it out. Because it is one of the most incredible stories. I'd call it one of the top 10 UFO stories there is the Ariel story. And everybody seems to know it, but I'm glad you went forward and actually documented it so people get the details and the whole story.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it is a good story. It is an interesting event for sure. And there's many others. There's a lot we haven't heard about yet. And
did these people have a support group that they belong to? Any of these experiences, like with AA, with any of these things, there's a lot of UFO support groups. Have you heard them sort of joining together and talking? Do they talk to each other?
No, isn't that interesting? I find that really fascinating. That and I've also found this in other people that this has happened to, that they don't really want to talk about it too much, even to each other. Even when you've experienced the same thing as somebody else, you spend a lot of time with those people talking about other things, but very rarely do you talk about the experience itself.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So no, there's no one I'm aware of. That's what's really interesting too about these children, they aren't UFO, involved. Actually, it's not their interest. It happened to them, but I don't see them gravitating. They're sitting with it. They have to sit with it and live with it. And I mean, that's common. I see that everywhere, amongst people that this has happened to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I've found when I have some of these online experiences, I think people will come on and they'll hear other people talking, and then suddenly they'll just open up and talk, and it's almost therapeutic for people to actually experience it. Did you find that when they, like, say Emily at the first didn't want to talk, and then she told a little bit and told a little bit, did you find that it sort of made it better for them when they started to open up, and at first they didn't want to talk to you, and then when you sit down they just couldn't shut up?
Yeah, it was like releasing a dam, and then you see a lot of inner processing, them trying to sort it out. Once they speak it, I mean, it's kind of like with everything. Once you listen to a person, hear them out, they start to heal. If they can't tell their story at all, that just sits there and stews inside them. So seeing somebody for real and listening to them, that's a really important part that begins the healing process. And I saw that a lot with a lot of these children, and even the teachers and other adults, when they could really open up and share what they had seen without being laughed at, or any of the other things that go along with it. They began to process it and get through it. That's how we do it.
Wow. And you had one time had talked about this sort of the importance of figuring this out. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll sort of shut it down. Your idea that there's something seriously going on here, and that we have to deal with this. This is not just any story.
Yeah, I think we have to. I mean, we have a lot of issues on the planet right now that are real. These things have been here consistently over time, have been reported over time for a long time. We haven't been addressing it. They're obviously far more advanced than us, which means they can decide our fate. That doesn't mean that they're negative, positive, it doesn't matter. But we should know what they're here for, why, you know, where they're from, all that stuff. We can get to that later. We really need to understand their intentions. And it's very unwise for us not to do that because we don't know. And I mean, human beings change their mind about whether we should keep that field of animals out there alive or cut it down and put buildings up. I mean, that may sound ridiculous, but we don't know what that species, what they're going to think tomorrow, or who knows. We just need to know as much as possible. And I think a lot of people realize that now. And the more we know, the better. And it's not a sad story. It's just, you know, it's not a negative or positive thing. It's just a smart thing to do. And we need to do it.
Yeah. I've often referred to it as we're no different than any other social or political movement, whether it's African-American rights or gay marriage, whatever, that the onus is on us to put the story out, to raise consciousness, and then people will eventually make the right decision. So I really appreciate the fact that you've done all this work for 20 years and have put it out. I wish you all the best in terms of doing future projects and dealing with this, because you're probably going to get a lot more questions about this, and people are still going to be asking about this, you know, years from now. Finally, where can people get a hold of you if they want to relate something to you? Is it at arielphenomenon.com or?
Contact at arielphenomenon.com. Contact at arielphenomenon.com. Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there anything that you wanted to get out that we haven't talked about?
I'm just excited to see the news every day about NASA starting their program, astronauts coming out and saying that yes, we've seen them. We don't think they're from our planet. I mean, that's just finally, it's taken a long time to get to these days. And I mean, it's day after day, the Senate Intelligence Committee, you know, and then what's going to happen in August? A couple months from now, where are we going to be? And you know, the major media hasn't really been covering this in the way it should, but I think that's going to change. I think we're going to reach a point where there's just too many people coming forward.
Did you ever think it was going to happen? I've often talked, and like I started in 75. I don't know when you started getting into UFOs, but I never in a million years thought this would ever happen. Never.
I thought it'd be. I agree. I thought it would be dead and gone. You know, really. I was shocked when things began to shift. I figured I wouldn't be here for this moment. So it's kind of amazing to be alive in this moment. And I'm really interested to see what happens in the next couple of years. Yeah. I think we're going to go through it. We have to. I don't think we have a choice. Go through an awakening, so to speak. I don't know if that's the right word, but. Yeah.
Well, you're a big part of that awakening, and I appreciate what you've done, and wish you all the best. And we'll see where it goes. I'm pretty sure that with you that this is just starting to pick up pace, and that stories like yours will be stories that people will use as evidence. And fascinating to get these little children who, you know, you can tell, absolutely that they're telling the truth, to tell this bizarre story that has a maybe an important meaning for mankind. So thank you for that. And we will maybe down the road, if you have another project, we'll do another interview.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Grant.
And it was a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you, and from James Fox and from everybody. And so congratulations again.
And you spent some time in Africa, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Oh.
So I followed the story quite closely. I did a lot of research on it. And then I found that there's other schools, and I actually proposed to one of my colleagues to do a book on schools. And then it was Preston Dennett did the book on schools. And then I realized, like, wow, there's just so many schools. But yours and Westall are the two biggest ones that have gotten the publicity. So, and it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't spent 20 years on it. It was a big project to get it out. So I appreciate you did, because I think it's the biggest, definitely the biggest school story, and within the top 10 UFO stories of all times in terms of what it actually tells us, and the importance and the impact that story was. And that's what I sort of see. I always call it the theory of wow, that the beings are just doing these really bizarre things to get our attention. And then you tell the story, you're an experiencer, you go tell the story, and I tell a story, and these stories build. And eventually we learn it ourselves. It's not like they're going to come down and say, you know, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's. And they don't do that. They just do it this sort of gradual way, getting these little kids, and then you do the hard work and get it out to the mass population, and people will watch it, and you'll change some minds and raise the consciousness and help us to eventually get to a point where everybody realizes, yeah, this is for real, and we better figure this thing out.
That's the hope. Yeah. I appreciate all the work too.
Thank you, Randall. We'll talk down the road.
Yes, sir. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Grant.